And so Victor says to Walton, who again is kind of an extension of himself, and this is in chapter, it's the last chapter. Seek happiness and tranquility and avoid ambition, even if it be only the apparently innocent one of distinguishing yourself in science and discovery. Yet, why do I say this? I have myself been blasted in these hopes, yet another may succeed. So he's telling Walton, be a simple man. And he also goes back to that theme of being blasted. And I've mentioned this a couple of times before, but it goes back to that very early scene where Victor sees the lightning blast the tree. And the tree is full and beautiful, and the lightning strikes it, and boom, it is decimated. This is a metaphor, a simile, or a symbol for Victor himself. Victor was full of ambition, full of enthusiasm, but his actions blasted him, and he was never able to recover from that. And of course, it never says in the book that it was electricity or galvanism that brought the creature to life. But again, in the 1834 preface, Shelley does discuss that, and there certainly are examples of electricity throughout this book in the form of the lightning. Now, we see the creature again, and the creature has come. Victor has died, and the creature who has been tracking him and seems to know a lot about what's going on has come into the ship, and Walton confronts him. And the creature says, "O Frankenstein, generous and self-devoted being, what does it avail that I now ask thee to pardon me? I, who irretrievably destroyed thee by destroying all thou lovest. Alas, he is cold. He cannot answer me." This seems a strange thing coming from the creature after all that Victor did to him and didn't do for him. Now, I have taught this book several times in literature classes and in a myth and monster class. And just about everybody to whom I have spoken talks about Victor's response, that has written about it, and to whom I have spoken, talks about Victor's responsibility. Could this whole thing have been avoided if Victor had not abdicated his responsibility towards his creature? But beyond that, where does the creature's responsibility come in? The creature was a sentient being. He was very intelligent. He knew that he did wrong, and he even says later, in this scene, he says to Walton, "And do you dream?" said the demon. "Do you think that I was then dead to agony and remorse?" He continued, pointing to the corpse of Victor, "he suffered not in the consummation of the deed. Oh, no, not the 10,000th portion of the anguish that was mine during the lingering detail of its execution." A couple of sentences later, "Think you that the groans of Clerval were music to my ears? My heart was fashioned to be susceptible of love and sympathy, and when wrenched by misery to vice and hatred, it did not endure the violence of the change without torture such as you cannot even imagine." So the creature has a conscience. The creature knows the difference between right and wrong. And in my Myth and Monsters class, I ask, is the creature a monster? Are people monsters? Is Victor a monster? Whose responsibility was greater? Was it Victor's towards his creature? Or did the creature lose all sympathy by committing what he did and yet knowing it was definitely wrong? And there are some more allusions where he says, "Evil thenceforth became my good." It's an allusion to what? Allusion. Do you think I've been talking too long? An allusion to what Satan says in Paradise Lost. And I'm going to leave it here, except the creature, now that Victor is dead, has no reason to continue living. And he says, and again, this is just a couple of pages before the very end of the book, I shall collect my funeral pile and consume to ashes this miserable frame, that it remains may afford no light to any curious and unhallowed wretch who would create another as I have been. I shall die. And so the creature says in part that he's killing himself not only because he's miserable, but he's going to burn himself. Because, Walton's been curious. So what is Walton going to try to do? He doesn't want to die any other way, because then somebody might use him to find out how he was created, and he's not going to have this. And then the last words from the creature. My spirit will sleep in peace, or if it thinks, it will not surely think thus. Farewell. He sprung from the cabin window. As he said this, upon the ice raft which lay close to the vessel, he was soon borne away by the waves and lost in the darkness and distance. And so ends the saga of Frankenstein and his misbegotten poor creature. I obviously really like this book. Had I not liked it, I would not have written 50 pages of my thesis on it. There's so much more. This book is very rich in metaphor. Its themes are universal themes, and we see them repeated in many other works of literature. There are devices of the book. For example, it begins with the ship, comes back to the ship after the long interlude of Victor's tale. In Victorian novels, especially in the novels of Dickens, whenever you see a place or meet somebody in his books, you know you're going to see that place again, and you know you're going to meet that character again. We see this quite a bit in this book as well. Mary Shelley was before the Victorian era. She was in that romantic period. The book definitely shows aspects of that romantic ideology, but at the same time, she poses very basic questions about where is our place in the universe? Should we trespass upon that which belongs to deity? And again, she never talks about God in here. Now, there's lots of spirits and wandering spirits, and Victor definitely veers away from Christianity when he becomes basically a fury. The Furies in Greek myth hounded guilty people, especially those who had killed a relative. But yet Victor still takes upon the aspects of a God in creating life, and then also in taking life away. So I hope that you enjoyed the novel. And of course, there's going to be other things that I'm going to call upon you to individually bring forth from your reading of the book. And thus ends Frankenstein.